All our lives, we've been told to go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and you'll be set. How's that working out for you? I'm TaVona Denise, physical therapist turned life and business coach, and I'm on a mission to help you create a life you love and a business on your terms. If you want more time, more freedom, more flexibility, I can help you create it. Welcome to Breaking Protocol, the show for women in healthcare who want more. Dealing with overwhelm. I have to go into teacher mode with this one because I'm seeing a lot of overwhelm. Everywhere I look, people are talking to me privately. I'm seeing posts on Facebook and everywhere else where people are saying, I'm so overwhelmed right now. And so I've spent a lot of time working with women in healthcare who were overwhelmed, stressed, and burned out. And they thought it was due to various circumstances at work, the manager, the hours, the patients, their family members, student loans. But now many of us have been furloughed, some of us let go, and the overwhelm is still there. We think that we need circumstances to change for us to feel better, but then they change and we still don't feel better. And I understand because I was there before when I was feeling burned out, and I learned a very powerful tool about 6 years ago that I use to get past burnout, that I teach all of my clients, and that I want to share with you today. Right? I have been able to use this not only in my career, but in my business, in my personal, every area of my life, really. And so I didn't come up with this, but this is called the thought model. And it was taught to me by my mentor, Brooke Castillo. And how it goes is that for every circumstance or situation that happens in our lives, we immediately have a thought about it, right? And that thought causes us to feel a certain way. And how we feel, based on how we feel, we take certain actions, we do certain things. And sometimes that means we don't do certain things. And those actions or inactions over time cause the results that we have in our lives, right? So that's the thought model. And the way, my best example, the way I like to think about this is decluttering. So if we think about decluttering, stuff in house, there's stuff in the house. Anybody that looks at it would say, okay, there is stuff in the house. Now, where we get into trouble is what we think about the stuff in the house. So someone might look at the stuff in the house, the circumstance, the situation, there is stuff in the house. That is a fact. If we lined up 100 people, each person would say there is stuff in the house. So where we get in trouble is when we say there's just so much to do, or there's just so much stuff. Those are thoughts, AKA opinions about the circumstance, about the stuff in the house, right? And when we choose to think, sometimes it's an unconscious choice, but it's still, it's something that we can change, right? When we choose to think there's just so much to do, or there's just so much stuff in the house, then sometimes we feel overwhelmed based on that thought. Right. And when we feel overwhelmed, this is an actual real life example. I had a client come to me and she wanted to declutter. She looked at the stuff in the house. She thought there's just so much to do. And when she was thinking there's just so much to do, she felt overwhelmed. And when she felt overwhelmed, then what would she do? She would actually just eat, sleep, or watch TV. And the result of her doing that every time she looked at the stuff in the house and thought there's just so much to do and she felt overwhelmed was nothing got done with regard to the stuff in the house, which proved her original thought. And we can take decluttering the house out and we can put starting our business in, right? So you can choose to think that there is a lot of stuff to do or there's just so much to do. And if that thought makes you feel overwhelmed, then what are you doing when you're feeling overwhelmed because you're thinking there's so much to do? And the result oftentimes is the most important things don't get done or nothing gets done at all. We can insert weight. I have just so much weight to lose. And then you feel overwhelmed. And then what do you do when you're feeling overwhelmed? Which the result of that being you still have so much weight to lose, for an example, right? So that's why I told you that you can take this thought model and put any circumstance in your life in there. You can put debt in there. I have just so much debt to pay off, right? And then you feel overwhelmed with the amount of debt. And then you don't do anything. You don't look at it. You don't pay attention to it. You don't, and so then there remains so much debt to pay off. You can put anything you want into the model and see how it's playing out in your life. So the first step is to be aware of your thoughts. How do we know it's a thought again? If you lined 100 people up to look at that particular circumstance or situation, would they have the same thought about it? Would they say the same thing? Meaning, would they have the same opinion about it? And that's the good news, because if they would all say something different, then that means that it's a thought. And therefore, that can be changed. Because we just talked about how the thought makes us feel a certain way. And based on how we feel, we do certain things. And based on what we do over time, we're creating the results that we have in our lives. So the good news is nothing actually needs to change. That circumstance doesn't actually need to change for you to think about it differently so you can feel differently about it other than overwhelmed. And here's another example with regard to the decluttering. So say, for example, right now, your thought is there's so much to do and you feel overwhelmed. But let's take Marie Kondo, for example. She might look at same circumstance, stuff in house, and she might have a thought, oh, good, there's a new project. And she might feel excited when she thinks, oh, good, there's a new project, right? Same circumstance, stuff in house, two different thoughts generated two different feelings. And then the person that's feeling overwhelmed is over there binging on Netflix, and Marie Kondo got excited and she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Two different results in the end, same circumstance, which is really, really good news. So then if the first step is to be aware of your thoughts, and then what would be the second step? You want to question the thought, right? When it comes to overwhelm, many, many people have the thoughts, there's just so much to do. I have a million things to do. And if I had a million things to do, I would be overwhelmed and I would just want to go take a nap as well. But you want to question that thought. Is it true? Do you have a million things to do? Or is there just so much to do? Like, why might you be thinking that it's a lot? Sometimes there's another layer that you're thinking, I don't know where to start. If you wrote it down, you could see where to start. Maybe it's not that you don't know where to start. Maybe you're telling yourself, well, it's going to take too much time. Maybe you're telling yourself, I don't know what to do. Right? And all of those are questionable. You can challenge them. You can change them. And so how do you go about doing that? I think about if we're feeling overwhelmed and that's not a feeling that leads to us doing something about the circumstance, then how might you want to feel? When it comes to the thought of I have so many things to do, one of the thoughts that we play with sometimes with my clients is, I can only do one thing at a time, or I can only do what's right here in front of me. And so if you just take that thought on for a second, instead of thinking there are so many things to do, or I have a million things to do, what if you just chose to think, I can only do one thing at a time, or I can only do what's right in front of me? How might you feel? Oftentimes, the clients say, relieved. Okay, good. We can work with that. If you're feeling relieved because you're thinking, I can only do one thing at a time, what might you do? You might actually pick one thing and complete it rather than not doing any of the things. And then the result is to get one thing done. Now, I tend to be a little bit more action oriented and not using a lot of fluffy things to get me into action. So sometimes if I'm in overwhelm, how might I want to feel differently that might get me into action? So sometimes for me, I might want to feel determined. I might want to feel committed, right? Sometimes we don't need to be excited to get stuff done. Sometimes we might just need to be determined. Sometimes we might just need to be committed. And one of the thoughts that I use, and feel free to borrow it if it helps you, is I can figure this out. I can figure this out. Often when I choose the thought I can figure this out, I feel determined. And then I get to work. I create a plan. I try something, anything. And then eventually I figure it out. Sometimes if I think I can figure it out, depending on what the circumstance is, I might get excited. But just wanted to give you some suggestions or some options of how you can think from if you're thinking, I have so many things to do, what can you think instead that might help you move the needle, might help you actually start getting into action so that you can create different results in your lives? When we talked about questioning it, the first thing was to be aware. The second step was to question it. So if you're telling yourself there's just so much to do, or there's a lot to do, or I have a million things to do, let's take a moment and actually write them down. Sometimes when I'm talking to people and they say, I have a million things to do to get this project done. Okay, well, let's write it down. Right? Because if you can see it in front of you, sometimes you'll realize that it's not as much as you thought it was. It may not take as much time as you thought it would. Some of that stuff you don't even have to do to get the result that you're looking for. But when it's just swirling around in your head in this big gray cloud of ambiguity, it's kind of hard to create a plan from that. And then it can seem like this big thing, this big heavy weight on you, and you don't want to do anything at all. So be aware of how you're thinking, question the thoughts, write down all of the things. If you keep telling yourself, I have so many things to do, actually write them down. Right? Same thing goes in your business. I have seen so many women here, especially in the last couple of weeks, where many of us are saying, okay, this is my opportunity to actually take my business online. This is my opportunity to learn some new things and things that I wanted to do. And that gets them into action, right? And you start learning all the things. But you have this other thought. Remember, we talked about another layer deeper. You have this other thought, and be careful. Be careful if this is you. I'm not going to be able to handle it when it comes to your business. So maybe you've gone and you got your LLC, you got all of the other things, you set up all of your back-end systems. And now it's time to do the real work, the hard work of putting yourself out there and actually telling people about what you're doing. And you have in your mind, your thought is, I'm not going to be able to handle it. And when you think I'm not going to be able to handle it, then you feel overwhelmed. Sometimes people say inadequate, but for the purpose of today, we're talking about feeling overwhelmed. And when you feel overwhelmed, well, what do? You go back and you look at or buy more software. You go take more freebies and more webinars and learn more things, read more ebooks, right? Maybe you go set up some more systems for these imaginary clients that haven't come through the door yet. So those actions over time lead to a result of not actually figuring out that you can, or learning that you can handle it because of your initial thought of, I'm not going to be able to handle it, right? So just be careful. But the first thing is to be aware without judgment. It's just something that you didn't even know that you were thinking that was in there, that is in there messing things up in terms of the results that you want. And no circumstance changed. The situation didn't change. Just the way you thought about it, just the way you looked at it changed, which is a beautiful thing because that's a place of power, my friend. Your creativity can come from that. Your power can come from that. More feelings of excitement rather than overwhelm and dread can come from that, right? And so for today, if you're looking for something that you can do today, if you're feeling overwhelmed, the first thing that I would recommend, even before you write anything down, is to download the Calm app with the breathing bubble. I do not get paid for this. I love it. I use it all the time. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And because I'm an action-oriented person, my mind continues to race and spin in all of these things. But it's something about the breathing bubble and having to follow the pattern of breathing that helps me to calm down. And it just helps to slow down, maybe sometimes stop, but just slow down my heart and my mind from racing so that I can tap into that creativity and wisdom. And then once you've done the 3 minutes of the breathing bubble, then you want to go into seeing what's happening in there. Why am I feeling overwhelmed? And use that as a journal prompt so that you can get those thoughts out of your mind. What are the thoughts? If you're thinking, I have so much to do, or I have a million things to do, what are all the things? Like, get them out of your brain so they stop draining your batteries. And then when you can see them on paper, you have just enough separation from them to decide, one, do I want to keep thinking these thoughts? Are they serving me? Are they helpful? How else can I look at this, right? And then two, when you look at the things, so we have the subjective, which we do, the patient's subjective about what's going on. We have the objective measurements. So what are the thoughts? Subjective. What are the things? Objective. Write all of them down. Then you can look and say, oh, well, we don't need to do half of these things to actually get the result we're looking for. Or I don't know how to do this particular thing, but I need to do it. So let me specifically go learn about this thing rather than taking all the classes and not actually getting the results you want. Or maybe I don't need to do this thing. It's not the best thing for me to do. I can delegate it. That is how you come up with a plan. But it all started from your mind, from the thoughts that you're having. And so if you find yourself in this place of overwhelm and you really, really want to get your business started and this work is new to you and you want some support around it, feel free to hop on the phone with me. You can just go to TaVonaDenise.com/momentum. We'll do a consultation and take a look at the thoughts. Take a look at why you're getting stuck, where you're getting stuck, and how can we help you get unstuck and build some momentum so you can actually get out there and help. Until next time, my friend.